Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the CB vlog here on YouTube. If you want to help us out, you know what to do. Hitting subscribe is a great way to do that. Or you can check us out at patreon.com/commandersbrew. You can donate to the show directly. You can help us brew our decks, give us ideas for decks, things like that. It's really great. Check it out, patreon.com/commandersbrew. But without further ado, we're going to get into this week's vlog topic. Right, and that topic today is the MDFCs. We got into these guys a little bit on the set review, where we talked about talked about the new mechanics that we saw come out here in Zendikar Rising. But I wanted to go even a little bit deeper because I think these are going to have a pretty big impact on how we make decks from here on out. And no matter what format you're in, actually, I think that is true. So, Sean, why don't you tell us what MDFC means first of all?
So MDFC, Modal Double Faced Cards, they're a new kind of card that Wizards, how do you say this? They're a new mechanic. Are they a mechanic? They're a new thing that Wizards developed.
Yeah, right, because you couldn't just play either side of a card before, right? So that alone.
No. We've had cards in the past that had stuff on the front and stuff on the back. Real game changer to not have the regular back of a Magic card. And Wizards has been designing around there, and here's a new version of a card like that. And the way it operates is it has, most of them are lands on the back. Well, they're all lands on the back, but also some are lands on the front, and a bunch of other ones are other things on the front, like spells, creatures, that sort of thing. And you get to play them on whatever side you want. That's why they're modal.
Right.
You just pick a side. In the past, we've had to jump through hoops to transform them. They've always come down on the front side. You can't choose, and then there's a way to get them to the other side. But these ones, you just choose. You can, and the fact that they're all lands on the back and some on the front have really thrown everything we know about the decks into a loop. What do you does it count as a land or does it count as a spell? From the rules point of view, the rules see it on the front. When it's in your hand, when it's in your library, it is what it is on the front. It is maybe an instant or a sorcery creature, unless it's one of those ones that's both a land on the front and the back. The game won't see it as a land, which is what I understood, but then I know that you can Crucible of Worlds a land back. There's a card in the new set that lets you play lands from the graveyard, and you can play double-faced card lands, but only the land side. You're not allowed to do the front side of them. Let me look up the wording of that card. Yeah, which confuses me, because at first I thought if it's in the graveyard and the game only sees the front, it's not a land in there. Huh. So how can you play it from there?
Well, that's good to know. That you look that up real quick, and I'll get into what I wanted to. Part of what I wanted to start with, which is, what are we talking about when we talk about replacing these in our deck? So, as you know, these are all. There are some that don't come into play tapped. There are some that you can pay 3 life, and those are the mythics. So I don't want to talk about those right now because obviously I think those are just free rolls, but they're also mythic, so they cost a lot of money and stuff. So let's talk about from a budget brewing perspective, where we're looking at basically all the ones that come into play tapped. So the rares and under, specifically even the uncommons, because I think that that's where there's a lot of discussion to be had. Again, for us, people who are brewing a ton of decks in Commander. So here I got I'm gonna say I'm gonna shoot a couple of these at Sean. I'm going to get his thoughts on it. But if I'm talking about replacement first. So I don't think it's correct to just one-for-one replace these with lands, right? Take out a basic land, put in something that has to come into play tapped and red, and then have a spell on the other side. I feel like that's probably not correct, but I feel like it's 75% correct or 70% correct. You know what I mean? So I feel like, just as a general rule of thumb, it's kind of easy, and maybe it's an okay starting point to do kind of a 2-for-1 type thing. So what I'm talking about is, usually for me, I start with 38 lands and then 62 other cards. Obviously one of them being your commander. So 61 other cards counting your commander, not counting your commander. I think that if I were to include 62 cards, and I had, let's say, 4 of them were MDFCs, I would then include 2 more other like spells. I feel like I would be clear to take out 2 basic lands and put in 2 regular spells. I think that's pretty safe. Now, it does depend on how many other come into play tapped lands that I am comfortable with, because that is a personal thing. So I kind of looked up like what people think about this, and it just truly varies, right? If your meta is super fast and super competitive, obviously you don't want like any base to come into play tapped lands, in which case you can that kind of makes it that you can afford to play, you know, a couple of these, and it is kind of a free roll, because if you only have a couple, then it's not going to really hinder you that much. But I think for us, and if you're in like the same category as us, you're running guild gates, you're running gain lands, you're running bounce lands, and we're running, you know, Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds. We're running those as kind of our like base of land bases, right? That is the base of our land base, and then we kind of add stuff in from there. And just looking at what's available to us, the great trick, by the way, if you use Scryfall, it's very easy. Just type in, I think it's IS :MDFC, and it'll just give you it'll just show you all the MDFCs. And currently there are only MDFCs from Zendikar, so you don't need to specify anything else just to look at these cards. So I think like a 2-for-1 ratio is pretty safe, even in our kinds of decks. I don't think, because I think that the instance that you'll need to play these as lands is actually pretty low. So I think like having 4 of these in your deck, you're very unlikely to actually need them as lands, because I think you'll only really want to play these as lands, no matter what they are, is if they're like one of your first 3 to 4 land drops, right? Because ideally you get these in your opening hand, and okay, then I'll play them as a land, and then I can ramp from there on, and then I'm going. Because if they come up any place else in the game, you're pretty much going to just play them as the spells, unless you are really dry on lands, in which case you're like, okay, fine, I'll take the hit on this one. And that's kind of the worst case scenario, which is really not that bad if you think about it. So I think we're pretty safe to do that, and I don't think you want to run more than, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 of these. I think there is a limit, but that's for us to explore, and that's for us to, I think, play games with and figure out. And I don't think anyone's going to be able to just tell you that, because again, it's based on your land bases, it's based on what you're comfortable with, what your meta's like, all that kind of stuff. But what I want to do now, because I actually want to also try and figure out which ones of these are going to be staples. Which ones should we be including all the time? Is it like all of them? Is it only some of them? Okay, so I want to come to first. I want to come to you, Sean, and I want to see, do you have an update for us on this rules question?
Man, I can't find it. It goes too deep. Couldn't like without fully checking out of the podcast and like getting real deep in the rules. I can't figure this out. So I'm on the comprehensive rules, and there's stuff about double faced cards, but I can't find like a clear section on just modal double faced cards.
Well, we do know just what you said earlier, which is that for the most part in your library and things like that, it's the front side of the card that the game sees, and it only sees the back side when you decide to play it as a land. So it kind of makes sense that from your graveyard, if you're to play it, you can choose to play this card as a land. So I can see that makes sense.
But if it says you may play lands from your graveyard, the game doesn't see any lands in your graveyard. The game only sees spells, unless I'm wrong, and the game can see both sides.
Well, we'll have to. I mean, what was it you saw that said you could do that?
Someone. I've
just
been
a person
listening.
saying it, or
different content creators called out that green mythic that lets you play lands from the graveyard, and specifically clarified that you're allowed to play the land side, but you're not allowed to cast the spell side.
Well, okay. Well,
which would imply, unless I misunderstood and they only meant those lands that were lands on 2 sides. I don't know.
Well, at any rate, okay, forget about that for a sec.
Okay.
That is something it will be very nice to be clear on, though, certainly. But for right now, I'm just going to throw some of these cards at you, and you tell me
Yes.
In a 2 to 3 color deck, would you or would you not include these cards? Okay.
Okay.
Basically, just yes or no it, and you can expand if you want. But
Okay.
say first of all, we've got Akum Warrior, which is the 5 and a red, just 4/5 trample Minotaur, and on the back is the same color that taps every time. It'll be obviously the same color of land, but it has to enter the battlefield tapped. So, are you going to include this just 4/5 trample free creature in a deck that it doesn't have any synergies with?
I think my bar for these goes up the less colors I am.
For sure.
So in mono red, probably yes.
Right? Yeah.
But 2 or 3, no.
Right. Okay. What about Black Bloom Rogue, which is the 2 and a black 2/3 with menace that it gets +3/+0 if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard?
Same deal.
Same deal, right?
Mono black, for sure.
Right.
2 colors or more, probably not.
Okay, let's go up the chain a little bit. Let's go to Tangled Florahedron, which is the 1 and a green 1/1 that taps for green. How does this look to you in a, two color green deck?
This one is appealing in a green deck.
This one's very interesting because this has a different. This kind of creates a different problem as the other ones, or a different question, kind of, because when do you not play this? Like, when would you ever play this as a land?
Right. This is why it gets so tricky, because I would play it as a land, like in my opening hand, if I had no other ramp spells, no other mana dorks, no mana rocks, and only lands and spells that don't get lands. And I had fewer than 3 lands.
Right. Okay.
I would play this as a land.
So
but I would mulligan that hand though. I don't know if I would keep that hand in the first place.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, this one's a weird and tough one. Okay. What about? Okay. So those are that's kind of situational, that one. What about Bayene Veil? 1 and a blue. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Not a commander effect, right? We never run a card like this. But
no, and I would not put this in a mono blue deck.
You wouldn't even put this in a mono blue deck.
I would not.
It's a free roll. You sometimes get to
but
almost just take some. It's like gain a little bit of life, basically. If someone, if there's some guys attacking you.
I don't think it does enough.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So the opportunity cost there is not right for you. That
right.
You'd rather a basic land than this spell, basically.
Yes.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see where you land on this one. Kabira Takedown. 1 and a white, instant. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control the target creature or planeswalker.
This one I would be fine including, maybe even in a 2 or 3 color. I wouldn't do it in a 2 color deck that had white, maybe even a 3.
And these are all, by the way, uncommons. We haven't hit any rares or anything like that yet. So these cards are all Gumball or less.
Yeah.
Sajiri Shelter, 1 and a white. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice. I mean, we always include this. Like, I would say this, any white deck, right? Like, because I would run this. I would almost run this as a spell, if I wanted to protect my commander, right?
Yeah, we run God's Willing type effects, which is 1 mana. This is 1 more.
Mm-hmm. And it's just protection. Like, it's not the indestructible that we also tend to like as well, because we like surviving the board wipes, but still pretty good, right? Yeah. Okay, here's the one. Okay, wait, no, we're not there yet. I'm going to skip. I think that one's too good. Okay, so here's the one I wanted to get to right away. This is the one I think. I'll tell you what I think after. You tell me what you think. 2 and a green.
Okay.
Balaged Recovery. 2 and a green. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
One of my favorites out of all of them.
Yes. I think this goes in every green deck. And you can make arguments when we're talking about 4 or 5 colors. Yeah, I understand. I think that makes more sense. But I think a 1, 2, or even 3 color deck, Balaged Recovery, is pretty safe include.
This is why I can't wrap my head around this. The only way to figure this out really is to try it out a bunch of times. And I realize the data samples that we as Commander players have are abysmal.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do I play one version of a deck before I trade it in for a different deck? Or and these days I'm not playing as much Commander as I would love to. Let's be honest, I'm never playing as much Commander as I want to be playing. But even when I'm playing a fair bit of Commander, I'm rotating decks. So like if I had a Balaged Recovery in a deck, would I see it in 5 months? Like it's possible I don't even see this card for 5 months of playing Commander. I have no idea. Because the green ones are even harder to evaluate because the green's ramping for basics like crazy. So you could argue that it's even safer for green ones.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. And so the reason I wanted to like bring this up and like kind of get an idea of where we stand when it comes to the range of what we want to include, what we would think about including, and then what we definitely want to include is because, these are uncommons, but these are those types of uncommons, I think, and I think... I thinking about a couple of them, and like definitely thinking about Balaged Recovery, that this is like absolutely going to be one of those expensive uncommons.
Oh,
because you just and there's a couple of factors there. Okay, first of all, I just think it's good enough that actual every green Commander deck would want to run this, and second, I think pandemic wise, they may well be printing the same amount of this set, but it's not being opened the same way, before pandemic sets were being opened. And I don't know if that has as big an effect as what I think it does, but like it's got to have some effect, right? So I think that I'm not saying right away or anything. Like I think you're going to still be able to find this card and all the other uncommons for, 50 cents or less or whatever, right? For a pretty decent amount of time. But this is what always happens is it happens to us specifically on the show where we go like, hey, that card, we include that card in a brew. Like we only included that like 2 years ago. And now it's $5 or $3. Like this is the kind of card that's going to get up there where it's going to be like, I really think it's going to be more than uncommons usually get because Commander players are going to buy them all. Like I want to own like 10 of these because they just, And here's the other thing. When you're only including one of these, like let's say I was only including one MDFC in any given deck with green in it, right? I think it's a free roll to just swap out a forest for this. 1 for 1. I think that's pretty safe. Because especially
in a green deck,
if you're running 38 lands, yes. But I think if there was another one of this level, so let's talk about
let's talk about red ones where like red doesn't ramp as nicely as green.
Well, how about this? Yeah, I wanted to talk about this black one. MacLeod Rebirth. Single black for an instant. Choose target creature. You lose 2 life. Until end of turn, that creature gains when this creature dies. Return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control.
So I think that card in Commander, we have very, powerful ETB effects on creatures. We're running the best of the business. Sometimes our commander does that, right? Like I'd love to save my commander from going to the graveyard one time and not have to pay that tax. I'd rather pay 2 life in this card. So that one seems like it definitely has a place in a commander deck.
Definitely, right? Just on your commander alone when someone board wipes. This is amazing. Single black.
I know you're going with uncommons, and I don't mean to like.
I did want to talk about rare, so please.
Okay, what about, because we're in the black cards, what about the destroy a creature?
Yes, what is it called again?
It's called Hagra Mauling.
There it is, yes.
It costs 2 black, it's an instant, but it costs 1 less if the opponent controls no basic lands. Even in Commander, I don't think you'll ever get the discount on this.
Yeah.
And 4 mana for destroy target creature is too much.
I don't know if you'll never. There have been times when I have something that affects like number of basic lands or something, and I look at people's boards and I've been like, hey, you don't even have any basic lands. Oh, you know what it always is? It's always like Island Walk, and I'm just like looking at this like blue black player, and I'm like, hey, you don't even have any islands or swamps. What's going on? Anyways,
it is if an opponent, so it doesn't have to be the opponent whose creature you're destroying.
You're
so as long as there's some opponent who doesn't have.
I think that's like half and half.
Well, okay, so let's assume you're rarely getting the discount though.
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
This is an effect that all commander decks want plenty of.
Definitely. Like it's a free, basically murder, right? Like it's a one more and or
be
the
murder.
Same. But it could be murder, and I don't know, man. I think it's murder a lot of the time, but this is what I'm saying. So and this is a rare. So this one I can see the price being like a barrier, right? Because if this card becomes $6-7, then all of a sudden it's just like any other $6 or $7 card. It's like, well, I'll, if for some reason it really works with the deck and or I open one or something like that, that's where I'm going to include these cards. But otherwise, like if there's no barrier when it comes to price, if these things are 50 to 25 cents or whatever, then I'm just, I gotta look back at all my decks and go, can I just throw one of these in there? The same thing with the red, the fling. How many times have you been like, man, I wish I had a fling, but I didn't even put it in this deck because it's so situational? Well, Kazul's Fury is fling, right?
Well, one of the things that I do like about some of these cards, though, the fling is a very interesting discussion point too, because is it now? I mean, obviously, this is too complex of an example to just make up an answer to, but is it a drawback to be tempted to holding up 3 mana for that possible fling?
I don't
like how much mana can you afford to hold up at different times? This is why price is so key. Malakir, what is it? The Malakir, the single black one. I can hold up a single black for Malakir Rebirth, no problem. But when am I holding up 3 mana, one of which being red, like just incidentally?
Yeah, no, definitely. It is actually, even in Commander, it is, you're right, a sizable difference to go from 1 in a red to 2 in a red when you're talking about this type of effect, right? Because you're hoping that, like, well, yeah, I can not take too much of a hit by not spending 2 mana this turn, or in this case 3 mana is when it gets, yeah, you're right, it can get pricier. But the fact, I guess that's mitigated by the fact that this, like, easily replaced, 1 land, basically.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Tough.
But you see where the problem is, because if you're running less lands, or if you're running less basics,
you're actually probably running more lands, right?
Well, but if you're swapping out a mountain for Kazul's Fury,
right?
Then
if you're going 1 for 1, yeah,
your actual land count hasn't changed. So arguably, the more of these you hold in your hand to cast as spells, the fewer land drops you're making, and it will be even harder to hold up 3 red mana because there's less lands going.
That's why I don't think it's correct to just 1 for 1 swap them out for basics. I don't think that's right. I think you want to get somewhere to, like,
I don't know.
Look up a saying, so like 2 to 1 or whatever you want to say there. But like, but in the end, if like the thing I was saying, where if you go 38, 60, 62, but then you go 2 more, so you go like 64, 28, 36, I actually still have 40 lands in that deck, right? So actually I'm getting more lands that way and more spells. This is the thing you get. It's having your cake and eating it too. The only downside is when it comes to having to cast this card, it's going to cost me 1 more.
Okay. Here's a thought experiment.
All right.
Would you now? Okay, let's say you're not running a green deck.
Okay.
Let's say it's a non-green deck, and you are allowed. It's an Izzet deck. It's red-blue. You can replace every island and every mountain with the single blue, single red cycling land versions.
Every
basic becomes the cycling land versions.
So you're basically saying, am I willing to perpetually play a turn behind everyone else?
Yes, I left green out of this because they're not basics, so you can't use cultivate. So I want to leave that out of the discussion.
Would I play with every land comes into play tapped, and I mean, cycling is really good.
Well, and now that we're thinking about it, there's that red enchantment from a recent Masters set where it gives all your lands single red cycling.
I think that card's incredible.
So I guess that sounds like we're saying we would do that.
I think it only gives mountains but
no, it gives all lands cycling, but you have to cycle with red.
Oh, that's what it is. Yes,
yeah.
I mean, it's tempting. I think playing an entire turn behind the game, you'll certainly end up losing more games because we know how important going first is in a game. So not only sometimes not going first, but then playing an entire turn behind I think you are. I think that's a pretty significant cost.
Yeah.
That being said, it is tempting because there are those games where that doesn't end up mattering, because if you end up playing enough artifact ramp or just card draw enough where you're just guaranteed to be hitting those land drops, then it can even out, right? So
Well, because we're getting close. Like, we have cycling for a single of the color. We have cycling for two colorless and everything. And we have the deserts which cycle for one and their color. So, like, we're already getting to... And
you
then
can basically count all these too, right? Like, they're all...
Throw in a few... So we can almost run no basics anymore.
Oh, you could easily run no basics.
I mean, you could always have run no basics. But, it's getting to the point where I honestly don't know. My rule of thumb is going to be, if it's super cheap and an instant, I'm replacing a basic with it. Malakir Rebirth, easy peasy.
Yeah, I agree.
If I have other similar versions of it, I'm gonna run this version. Like, if I have a deck that already runs Fling because it wants to do Fling shenanigans, I'm running the Kazul's Fury.
Right, and I think that's like there certainly are decks where like Fling is just not a card you want, no matter what. Even if it was a 0 mana card that you just had in your sideboard. I guess actually that's not true. Of course you would just run that anyways. But you know what I mean. This small amount of opportunity cost is actually still like, I'd rather just have a basic land, and that's what I was about to say, is I do think that there is enough value in just a land coming into play untapped and being able to use it that turn. I think that is still when it comes to turns you want to make in Commander and the value you want out of a land, I think that it is a factor. I think it does make a difference. It can be a small one sometimes, but other times it can be the difference, right? Like, we've all been there where we're like, okay, if I just draw an untapped land, I win this game. Or, I draw an untapped land and I get to do my big thing here. And then you draw that Guildgate and you're like, I hate my life. So, I don't think I would ever run a deck that doesn't have any, like, that only has tapped lands. I think it's too much. I think it's too much of a cost.
Here's what I know now. The only thing I know for sure is I'm gonna run a few in decks to at least see how it feels, and I'm gonna go 1-for-1 lands.
You're doing it. You're going 1-for-1. See,
it's the only way to figure out how it feels. Does it feel like? And again, it might be 5 months before this data ever matters. Like, where I draw it late and it matters, and like I don't know. I just don't play 1,000 games of Commander a week.
Before we wrap up, I did want to get your thoughts on two other cards here. So we talked about Ondu Inversion a ton in the set review, because it's the destroy all non-land permanents, the planar cleansing for 8. We basically agreed that one's very good, but we didn't talk about any of the mythic ones, the ones that pay 3 life to come in untapped.
Sure.
So like Turn Timber Symbiosis, we didn't mention. 4 green for the sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. If that card has converted mana cost 3 or less, it enters the battlefield with +1 with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on it, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So its flip side is different, because as it enters the battlefield, you can pay 3 life, and if you don't, it enters tapped, so it can enter untapped. It's like a super shock. Oh, the bolt lands, you can call them. Anyways, what do you think of this? Because to me, we start talking about, like I said, like real life, like money cost here. Because obviously the opportunity cost here is like 3 life. It's like, okay, that's no problem. These are obviously better. This is just gravy. This spell is kind of, maybe I need to play with this card, because I'm paying 7 mana for something. I guess I get to look at the top 7 cards and find something good, but yeah, I'm still paying 7 mana for it. Like, you know what I mean? Anyways,
if you want to,
right,
or just have more land.
Exactly. If I got nothing else to do, guess what? This card's great, which is the point, right? So what do we think of these? Like, they're all pushing over $10. Like, it's too much for me personally.
again, like what if I'm trying to figure this out by imagining a world where what if your current deck, what if you customed it, you just like broke the rules, and you on the back of every single one of your non-land cards you just put, this is a land, you can pay 3 to have it come in untapped on everything.
That's great.
No problem.
No problem.
You'd run everything.
Well, you'd have to. That's how the game would work, wouldn't it?
Right.
It's on everything.
Except for a base, like, yeah, I don't know. I honestly can't figure, because like,
Well, like, so this is what I'm talking. What I'm more talking about here isn't whether or not the card is worth it. It's more about whether or not the price is worth it. So if we're talking about these cards being
real,
like being
dollar
because
prices,
obviously I think that the 3 life is nothing, and it's free. It is pure free roll. You can replace a basic land with this. You're just pure happy to have it. If it, if you have creatures in your deck, that's the only thing this thing wants you to have. But I can't, like, is this, like, this is not a flashy card. This is a very vegetable-like card. It's almost like it is a land, I guess. But like, so you and I, specifically budget players, we're not spending $10, $15 on lands, even though that's probably the cards we should be spending that kind of money on. Those are like the only cards we should be spending that much money on. But we're not, because it's not flashy. It's not, it doesn't like give us the feels of a big flashy card that we might break, we might bust out the bank account for. So like, I just think, like, do you think we're going to be running into these as much as we would others, or is this, people are just like, no, you know what, whatever it is, $13 is too much, or how much is this right now? Yeah, it's like, well, it's like $20 or something, or $12, 20 for that crazy the word foil version. So at least we have that holding this back, because otherwise I think that these are like companion level, like, free rolls. So I guess I'm kind of glad these are expensive, is kind of what I'm getting at. Whereas I think like MacLeod Recovery, I think Malakir Rebirth, like, you're just, and Hagra Mauling, like the rare black one, even Glasspool Mimic, the two in a blue clone that clones one of your own creatures only. When we were talking about the set review, I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know if that's... No, it's incredible. It's very good. What am I talking about? Like, it's very, very good. So I think these cards are gonna... I think we're looking at a bunch of new Commander, like, must includes, essentially. And obviously that's, like, not actual must. But, like, it's something that's like, well, if you've got this... If you have the card, there's no reason not to include them, is what I'm saying. Anyways, it's a big discussion. They're shaking up Magic like crazy these days, really, right?
Yeah.
Like, the things they're doing, the types of cards they're including, it's wild. So, thanks for listening, everyone. If you if you want to help us out, of course, you know what to do. Hit subscribe down here. Leave some comments. Tell us what you think about the MDFCs. What are you thinking about when coming to we're talking about replacing these cards and replacing lands in your deck. I actually really like to know what people are thinking about this. So let us know, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCGplayer affiliate link below.
That helps us out too. And for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.